one Sunday and done, because there's not a whole lot to some of the minor prophets. In fact, some of them are just like a chapter long. But this morning we're going to cover Habakkuk and kind of talking about how he goes through what he goes through and how he handles that and such. So we're going to start off with response time on my window here is kind of slow. We're going to start off by going through one of the Bible Project videos on Habakkuk. And then after that, because it's just a 3-chapter book and it's only 56 verses total, we've got 3, 6, 9, 12, 14. So what we're going to do is we're just going to read through the whole book here in class this morning. So it's 6 verses per person. Yes. Well, no, we've got 3, 6, 9, 12, 15. So if I take the last one, then that's 4 verses each. 4 verses each. Okay? So it's not that much more than what we usually do. If you need a Bible, I don't know where the rest of the actual Bibles are. So hopefully everybody's got one on their phone that doesn't have one. So, but what I wanted to say before we get into the video and the reading of the book itself is as you're watching the video or as you're reading through, as we're reading through the book of Habakkuk, if there's something that catches your attention, just like always, if there's something that you find interesting, that you've got questions on, or if there's just something that just kind of speaks to you in whatever way, just write it down in your margins there and kind of keep track of it so that after we get done with reading through it, we'll kind of go through it from there. So, with no further ado, we will go to our video. Do you mind to turn off the light? What? Hang on, that's not what's supposed to happen.
The book of the prophet Habakkuk. He lived during the final decades of Israel's southern kingdom, and it was a time of injustice and idolatry. He saw the rising threat of Babylon on the horizon, and that was not good news for anybody. But unlike the other prophets, Habakkuk does not accuse Israel. He doesn't even speak on God's behalf to the people. Rather, all of his words are addressed personally to God. And the book tells about Habakkuk's personal struggle, his journey of trying to believe that God is good when there is so much evil and tragedy in the world. And so Habakkuk's words are actually poems of lament, and they're very similar to the laments that you find in the book of Psalms. The poet lodges a complaint and then draws God's attention to suffering or injustice in the world, demanding that God do something. And knowing about this lament form, it's actually the key to understanding the design and message of this short book. Chapters 1 and 2 are framed as a back-and-forth argument between Habakkuk and God, and the prophet lodges 2 complaints to which God offers 2 responses. His first complaint is that life in Israel has become horrible. The Torah is neglected, resulting in violence and injustice, and it's all being tolerated by Israel's corrupt leaders. And Habakkuk, he's crying out, asking God to do something, but nothing seems to change. But then all of a sudden, God responds. He says that he's very aware of the corruption of his own people, Israel, and that he's summoning the armies of Babylon to bring down his justice on Israel. And very similar to the message of Micah or Isaiah, God says he will use this terrifying empire to devour Israel because of their injustice and evil. But Habakkuk has a problem with this answer, and so he offers his second complaint. He says Babylon is even worse than Israel. They're more corrupt, they're more violent, they've deified their own military power, they treat humans like animals, gathering them up like fish in a net, he says. They devour nations and people groups in order to build their own empire. And so Habakkuk says, how can you, a holy, good God, use such corrupt nations as your instruments in history? He demands an explanation. In fact, he depicts himself as a watchman on the city walls, waiting for God's response, which eventually comes. God tells Habakkuk to get out some tablets and chisel and write down what he sees and hears. It's a vision about an appointed time in the future, that even though it may seem slow in coming, it will eventually come. In fact, God says that the righteous person will live by their faith in this hope and vision. So what is this divine promise that Habakkuk is supposed to write down? It's that God will bring Babylon down. God says that the violence and oppression of the nations creates this never-ending cycle of revenge, and that God will use this cycle to bring about the rise and fall of nations. And the fact that God might for a time use a corrupt nation like Babylon does not mean that he endorses everything that they do. He holds all nations accountable to his justice, and so Babylon will fall along with any other nation that acts like them. God's promise is then elaborated by a series of 5 woes that describe the kinds of oppression and injustice that's perpetrated by nations like Babylon. The first 2 target unjust economic practices, like how wealthy people will charge ridiculous interest just to keep poor people in debt, and so they build their wealth through crooked means. The third woe is a critique of slave labor, treating humans like animals and threatening them with violence if they don't produce. The fourth woe targets the abuse of alcohol by irresponsible leaders. While people are suffering under their bad leadership, they're partying and wasting their money on sex and booze. And the last woe exposes idolatry, the engine that drives such nations. They have made money and power and national security into their gods, offering these allegiance at all costs. And so people become slaves to their own national empire. Now, the practices described here aren't unique to Babylon, but that's part of the point. Given the human condition, most nations eventually become Babylon. And so this is how God's answer to Habakkuk in this book becomes God's answer to all later generations, to anyone who lives in a world ruled by other Babylons. But it leaves the question hanging. Is God going to let this cycle, the rise and fall of Babylon-like empires, go on forever? And that question is what chapter 3 is about. We're told that this is a prayer of Habakkuk, and it begins by Habakkuk pleading with God to act now in the present like he has in the past in bringing down corrupt nations. And what follows is a very ancient poem. It first describes a powerful, terrifying appearance of God. It's very similar to the opening poems of Micah and Nahum, and similar to the appearance of God at Mount Sinai in the book of Exodus. There's cloud and fire and earthquake. When the Creator shows up to confront human evil, everybody will be paying attention. Habakkuk then goes on to describe this future defeat of evil as a future exodus. So just like God came as a warrior and he split the sea in his battle against Pharaoh, Habakkuk says that God will once more bring his judgment down on the head of the evil house. So Pharaoh, like Babylon, has become here an archetype of violent human nations. But at the same time, we're told that when God confronts evil, he will save his people and his anointed one. It's a reference to the king from the line of David. And so in this poem, the Exodus story of the past has become an image of the future Exodus God will perform. He will once again defeat evil and bring down the pharaohs and the Babylons of this world. He'll bring justice to all people and rescue the oppressed and the innocent. And it's this hope that enables Habakkuk to conclude the book with hopeful praise. Even if the world's falling apart with food shortage or drought or war or whatever, he will choose trust and joy in the covenant promises of God. And so Habakkuk, by the end of this book, becomes a shining example of how the righteous live by faith. Habakkuk recognizes just how dark and chaotic the world and our lives can become. And he invites us into a journey of faith, of trusting that God loves this world more than we do, and that he will one day deal with its evil. And that's what the book of Habakkuk is all about.
All right. So let's go ahead and go into reading through Habakkuk. And that's right. Let's see here. Who remembers who started reading last week? Was it on that side? Was this side?
It was on that side. No, it was on this side. He's wrong. I think it was on this side.
I had a penny
somewhere. It's not in the middle.
Here we go. Penny. Alright. Here we go. Heads, starts with Jason.
You settled it. I'll start in the middle.
We'll start in the middle and then we'll go in the direction.
Okay. Which direction?
And then when you get to one of the ends, you just come across.
Alright, so we'll go with Jaden, we'll go this way. Everybody's gonna be reading, so. Alright, so start us off in chapter 1, verse 1.
4 verses.
Four verses each.
The prophecy that Habakkuk the prophet received. Our own Lord must I call for help, but you do not listen, or cry out to you violence, but you do not save. Why do you make me look at injustice? Why do you tolerate wrongdoing? Destruction and violence are before me, there is strife and conflict abound. Therefore the laws paralyze and justice never prevails, the wicked and the righteous, so that the justice is prevented. No, perverted. Whatever.
Look among the nations, see, wonder, and be astounded, for I am doing a work in your days that you would not believe if told. For behold, I am raising up the Chaldeans, that bitter and hasty nation, who march through the breadth of the earth to seize dwellings not their own. They are dreaded and fearsome, their justice and dignity go forth from themselves. Their horses are swifter than leopards, more fierce than the evening wolves. Their horsemen press proudly on. Their horsemen come from afar, they fly like an eagle, swift to devour.
They all come intent on violence. Their hordes advance like a desert wind, and gather prisoners like sand. They mock things and scoff at rulers. They laugh at all fortified cities by building earthen ramps. They capture them. Then they sweep past like wind and go on, guilty people whose strength is their God. Lord, are you not from everlasting? My God, O Holy One, you will never die. You, Lord, have appointed them to execute judgment. You, my rock, have ordained them to punish.
Your eyes are too pure to look on evil. You cannot tolerate wrongdoing. Why then do you tolerate the treacherous? Why are you silent while the wicked shallows up those more righteous than themselves? You have made people like fish in a sea, like creatures that have no ruler. The wicked pulls all of them up with hooks. He catches them in a net. He gathers them up in a dragnet, and so he rejoices in glad. Therefore the sacrifices to his net and burns increases to his judgment, for by his net he lives in a luxurious and enjoys the glorious food.
Choices.
Choices food.
He used to keep on emptying his net, destroying nations without mercy. I will stand at my watch and my stations myself on the ramparts. I will look to see what he will say to me, and I will answer what answer I am to give this comfort. Then the Lord replied, write down the revelation and make it plain on tablets, so that a herald may run with it. For the revelation awaits on an appointed time. It speaks of the end and will not prove false. Through it linger, wait for it. It will certainly come and will not delay.
See, the enemy is puffed up, and his desires are not upright. But the righteous person will live by his faithfulness. Indeed, wine betrays him. He is arrogant and never at rest, because he is as greedy as the bird, and like death is never satisfied. He gathers to himself all the nations, and takes captive all the peoples. Will not all of them taunt him with ridicule and scorn, saying, woe to him who piles up stolen goods, and makes himself wealthy by extortion? How long must this go on? Will not your creditors suddenly arise? Will they not wake up and make you tremble? Then you will become them.
Woe to him who builds, because you have plunged many nations, people who are left will plunder you, for you have shed human blood, you have destroyed lands and cities and everyone in them. Him who builds his house by unjust gain, setting his nest on high, to escape the clutches of ruin. You have flooded the room from many people, shaming your own house and forfeiting your life. And the stones of the wall will cry out, and the beams of the woodwork will echo.
Woe to him who builds a city with bloodshed and establishes a town by injustice. Has not the Lord Almighty determined that the people's labor is only food for the fire, that the nations exhaust themselves for nothing? For the earth will be filled with the knowledge and glory of the Lord as the waters cover the sea. Woe to him who gives drink to his neighbors, pouring it out from the wineskin till they are drunk, so that he can gaze on their naked bodies.
You will be filled with shame instead of glory. Now it is your turn to drink, and let your nakedness be exposed. The cup of the Lord's right hand is coming around to you. A disgrace will cover your glory. The violence you have done to Lebanon will overwhelm you, and your destruction of animals will terrify you. For you have shed human blood, you have destroyed hands and cities, every one in them. Of what value is an idol carved by a craftsman, or an image that teaches lies, and one who makes it trusts in his own creation, who makes his idols that cannot speak? Woe to him who says to wood, come to life, or to lifeless stone, wake up. Can it give guidance? It is covered with gold and silver, there is no breath in it.
The Lord is in his holy temple, and let all the earth be silent before him. A prayer of Habakkuk, the prophet, on St. God.
That Lord. Guyanoth or something like that.
Lord, I have heard of your fame, and I stand in awe of your deeds. Lord, repeat them in our day, in our time, make them known. In wrath, remember mercy. God came from Teman, the Holy One, from Mount Paran. His glory covered the heavens, and his praise filled the earth.
His splendor was like the surprise rays flashed from his hand, where his power was hidden. Plague went before him.
Pestilence.
Followed his steps. He stood and shook the earth. He looked and made the nations tremble. The ancient mountains crumbled and the age-old hills collapsed, but the marches on forever. I saw the tents of
Kashan.
in distress, the dwellings of Midian in anguish. You were angry with the rivers. Lord, was your wrath against the streams? Did you rage against the sea when you rode your horses and your chariots to victory?
You uncovered your bow, you called for many arrows, you split the earth with rivers. The mountains saw you and
Writhed.
Torrents of water swept by the deep roared and lifted its wings on high. Sun and stood still in the heavens of the glint of your flying arrows, at the lightning of your flashing spear. In wrath you strode through the earth, and in anger you
Threshed, yeah.
The nations. You came out to deliver your people, to save your anointed one. You crushed the leader of the land. Wickedness, you stripped him to his second foot. With his own spirit, you pierced his head when the warrior stormed out to scatter us. Floating as though about to devour, he wretched who were in hiding. You trampled the sea with your horses, shining the great waters. I heard, and my heart pounded, my lips quivered, and the sound of decay crept into my bones, and my legs trembled. Yet when I wait impatiently for the day of calamity to come unto the nation invading us.
Though the fig tree does not bud and there are no grapes on the vines, through the olive crop fails and the fields produce no fruit, though there are no sheep in the pen and no cattle in the stalls, yet I will rejoice in the Lord. I will be joyful in God my Savior. The sovereign Lord is my strength. He makes my feet like the feet of a deer. That he enables me to go on the heights for the director of music on my singing.
All right. So, anything there that you guys noticed that you thought was interesting and had questions on?
I thought hitting him in the head with lightning bolt was a lot.
Yeah, I like seeing that part of the graphic. And I mean, obviously, it's a metaphor and such that, you know, kind of like God's striking a person down. And I guess it's just kind of trying to envision the violence of the force in which God is going to use to bring this person down. But yeah, and it might be, I have to talk with some other people, but it might be kind of a reference similar to what God says about the snake in the garden, you know, where, you know, you will strike his heel, or you will crush his head and such. And so it might be kind of a reference to that as well. I know some of the stuff that I was noticing as we were going through it, like in verse 3, you know, I guess it's really verse 3 and 4, but, you know, Habakkuk's really making that complaint about, you know, why are you watching this happen? Why aren't you doing something? Or verses 12 through 13, let's see here. I don't remember what caught my attention about that now, but okay. But yeah, there's a lot of good stuff in here. So
I liked chapter 3, verse 17 through 19.
okay. 17 through 19. What was it?
It was, though the fig tree does not bud and there are no grapes on the vine, though the olive crop fails and the fields produce no food, there are no sheep in the pen and no cattle in the stalls, yet I will rejoice in the Lord, I will be joyful in God my Savior.
Yeah. And what was about that really caught your attention?
I don't know, I just like it, like, even though nothing really is going right, like, the metaphors that he makes, he's still saying that he will rejoice in the Lord, because he's God and Savior.
Yeah, I mean that's exactly what he is saying right there. And we'll get to that a little bit more, but I mean that's pretty much how Habakkuk wraps it up. And so before I go to the next slide here, was there anything else anybody else saw or noticed that caught your attention? Okay. So kind of like what they were talking about, really what you see in chapters 1 and 2 is this conversation between Habakkuk and God. And so one thing to kind of be reminded of here is that this isn't a standard, you know, prophetic book. Usually the books of the prophets are talking about the judgment, and it's a prophet speaking to the people and such, but this is really just Habakkuk's letter to God. And so he's in a terrible time in Judah's history. I mean, he's at the end of Judah's history, and you know, he's crying out to God. And so the first thing that he says is, "Are you going to do something about this?" You know, I mean, he's watching as people are just corrupt and destroying the city and not obeying God, and he's just sitting here saying, "Look. Do you not see this? I mean, this is craziness going on down here. Are you going to do something?" And so, I mean, how many of you guys have ever felt like you've been in a time in your life where you've been just sitting there going, "Does God not notice what's happening right now?" You can answer that. I mean, have any of you guys ever felt like that? Okay. And if you haven't yet, it's likely that you will, just because of the nature of the world. And so Habakkuk's complaint is the same one that a lot of us either have gone through or will go through. what are you going to do? Things stink down here. You're going to do something, because if you really are just, how can you allow this? And so God's response is, yeah, I'm just. I'm going to bring Babylon to issue my judgment. Hey, Scott. I loved how they had Habakkuk's response on the animation there, because Habakkuk's just like, what? What do you mean you're going to bring Babylon? I'm sorry. I guess we didn't bring in there's a couple out in the hallway. If you just want to grab one of those chairs out there. I'm sorry. And so that's one of the reasons why I really do like these Bible Project videos, because having read through this book before, I never really fully understood just how dramatic Habakkuk's response to God is. And so it's kind of neat seeing how Habakkuk is shocked at God's response. And so God plans to bring that, and Habakkuk basically just comes back and says, look, if you are just, and I know that you are, but if you are just, how can you allow this to continue? Because he knows that Judah is bad. Well, what was his plan? What did Habakkuk want to happen?
He wanted God to present his whole miracles to Judah.
Yeah, or at the very least, who did he want God to punish and to strike down?
Babylon.
Not yet.
Not yet. So Israel.
Yeah, Judah. Yeah, he wanted God to come in. He wanted God to punish the leaders and all these other people in Judah that weren't following his commands. And he wanted Judah to just be able to stay where it was, essentially. And God's saying, nope, I'm bringing in Babylon to issue my judgment. And so Habakkuk's sitting here saying, look, Habakkuk's worse than us. You're going to use somebody that's worse than us to punish us? I don't get it. How does that work? And so this is when God comes in with his statement about, okay, don't worry. It's not like I'm just going to bring in Babylon and I'm just using them. They're going to punish you, and then they're going to be, continue to do well or whatever else. I'm going to bring them down too. I'm going to bring my judgment on Babylon as well. Okay? And so God is specifically saying, look, I am just. I am going to judge Babylon for what's going to happen. But I am going to use Babylon to this end. And so just because God uses Babylon, it doesn't mean that he's saying, I agree with what they're doing. He doesn't. And that's why he clearly goes into these different woes in chapter 2. He goes into all these different things about the things that they're doing that he knows. And so he's letting Habakkuk know, I do know. I do see what's going on here, and they are going to be punished for it. And it's interesting to go through and see just what God is punishing the Babylonians for, because it's not just the stuff that they're doing to people. If you go to verse 17, he says, the violence you have done to Lebanon will overwhelm you, and your destruction of animals will terrify you. For you have shed human blood, you've destroyed lands and cities and everyone in them. Who is God saying Babylon has hurt?
Everybody.
Everybody. Like humans? What else?
Everything.
And everything. And so God's point here is that Babylon has not just hurt people. They have hurt all my created order. They will be punished severely for this. And so he's specifically trying to show Habakkuk, I see it. I know what's happening. And I will judge because I am just. And so that's how Habakkuk is able to do the response that he gives, that Kason was pointing out. I can live in peace because God is just. See, Habakkuk's whole concern at the beginning of this is, God, I know I've grown up hearing about your justice and that you are good and such, but I don't get it. I mean, if you're just, why is this happening? If you're good, why is this happening? And God is saying, I am just. Let me work in my time. Let me work on my schedule. We've talked before about how God doesn't always do his punishments when we think that they should occur? What did we say about what's going on in that in-between, of when we think punishment should happen and when God actually acts? What's occurring in the in-between? Grace. Rock. No, grace. God is trying to offer grace. I mean, we just went through Jeremiah. How many times does Jeremiah get onto the people and say, "You're crazy. You people are nuts"? Lots. He's consistently going to them. And how many times does he tell them, "Change your ways or God's going to destroy you"? A lot. Yeah. I mean, it's a lot. I mean, he goes through that book consistently, just going, "Change. Just stop what you're doing. Go back to God." And they don't listen. And so this is God's way of offering grace. He's just trying to say, "Look, I'm going to give you a chance. I'm trying to wait this out for you." Okay? So we can live in peace because we can be certain that God is just, that he's going to punish those that go against his plan. And so the message this morning is that no matter how bad things might be in this world, we can have peace knowing that God is just. All right, while you guys are writing that down, want to go through the lock-in stuff real quick? Yeah.
I have a big can of nacho cheese for like chips.
Bring it.
It's already here.
Oh, it's already here?
Yeah, it's in the kitchen. You forgot the box was coming. Oops, sorry, my bad.
I actually went to I didn't like
Okay. So first off, let's talk people that are coming. Raise your hand if you are coming to the lock-in tonight. Okay, good. Debatable? Oh, well, if you're here. Okay.
I may be here.
Okay, yeah, if you need to be here, the doors are going to be locked, so if you need to get in and the doors are locked, just call us and one of the adults will come in and let you in. How many of you guys are bringing friends? Okay. Two-ish?
One right now.
Potentially three. Okay. Rice, okay.
I've got one.
Jeff, one.
Okay.
Good.
What?
I just
Oh, okay, I see.
two, I'm waiting on my other friends.
Gotcha. Alright. Yeah, and Hayden, you said one? Hudson.
I'm not exactly sure if it's one,
Okay.
but two just in case.
Okay. Okay. Alright. And you guys can't. You're bringing two? Okay. Alright. And remember, guys, you can bring friends. We're not trying to discourage you from doing that, okay? In fact, we want you to bring your friends. So.
I have two kids that both could go.
Oh, yeah? Alright. So. Alright. And then just to make sure that we've got enough food and snacks and drinks for everybody. Everybody's planning on bringing drinks and snacks, correct?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. Okay. And I don't know if you guys want to bring like waters or Powerades or Cokes or whatever. No Red Bulls. No Red Bulls.
Mac and cheese.
Mac and cheese, that'd be good.
We're having waffles.
Let's all have people.
First of all, at some point, I'm hoping some of you guys would go to sleep. But I'm also concerned for safety reasons that late at night and that much activity going on, I'm concerned that might cause like a heart issue for somebody. Yeah. No, we're not in KGB. We're staying indoors. Especially when it's like 5 degrees outside. We're staying indoors.
Flashlight.
Everyone is sort of like,
Oh.
That's not a bad idea.
What do you say?
Okay, that's a good idea. You guys bring flashlights and we could probably play some KGB in the building.
Well, how are you supposed to get from one side to the other? Because there's only one place you can get there, and they're just gonna sit there.
No.
No, look at education.
Hey. Okay, here's what I've learned. Try it. If it doesn't work, it doesn't work. And if it does, awesome, we got a new game we can do. So
Just everyone go out once.
And we can play Capture the Flag too.
yeah, I need to make sure I've got glow sticks for capture the flag. So okay, aside from that, okay, aside from that, a couple things that we need to discuss. If you guys can be here at 2:30, so we can take care of a few more things before the lock-in starts tonight, that'd be good. For one, we need to put this baseboard up real quick. Maddie knows how to put the glue on and get that done, so if we could get a couple people to help her out. We also need a couple people working on the ping pong table to get it fixed and put back together. So I know Aiden is going to be here with that. He's got some tools. I'll probably like show up at 2:30 and like kind of make sure everybody's on the same page and get stuff done. And then I'm probably going to go to Walmart to pick up pizzas. And then I need to go over to the student center to pick up ping pong balls.
What about the pool table?
I haven't heard yet about the pool table, so we'll wait and see. But
We need more cheese.
yeah, especially I'm talking about pizza for the dinner for tonight. So, anyways, so trying to think if there's anything else. All right. All right. So raise your hand if you can be here at 2:30 today to help.
Hopefully.
My busy schedule.
Yeah, I should.
Okay.
Maybe.
That's fine. Okay, so yeah, try and be here at 2:30 so we can get stuff put together around the building. Because we'll probably need to put some signs up just to make sure to point out people don't go to certain rooms, like the BBS room. Do not go to the BBS room. So, all right. So aside from that, next week we've got movie night here at the building. I was thinking about Napoleon Dynamite. So.
What? Watching the whole
So, alright, that's it. Love you guys. Head on over to worship.
I love Napoleon Dynamite.
It's a fun movie.
So.
I'm pulled down. The dance was literally sitting the dance for how it showed, and it was already.